Greetings, fellow Watford fans. Omar here with another Orns 10-minute take. Crystal Palace 1, Watford nil, and that result confirms Watford's relegation to the Championship. A lifeless performance, a spineless Watford, a Watford side that didn't have any fight or desire at all, didn't play for pride, didn't play for the shirt, didn't play for the fans, and they barely played really for their wages today in a lifeless display, an utterly incompetent Watford side that kept giving the ball away at every turn. They didn't have possession really for more than 30 seconds in this game throughout the entire 94 minutes of play. It was that poor. It was that uninspired. A rare foray every now and again into the Crystal Palace half. And that really was about it as far as this game is concerned for Watford. Now, the atmosphere for the beach was created by the Crystal Palace fans long before the opening whistle of the game because the balloons were all over the place at Selhurst Park. The balloons that were red and blue, and they may well have been yellow and black beach balls because Watford were on the beach for this game, as they have been in many games this Premier League season. A team that just is not good enough for the Premier League. I think that's been well established now, and this display only confirmed that fact, as did the result itself. The Palace goal coming after the 31st minute of play through a penalty from Wilfried Zaha, who has long been a Watford nemesis and a tormentor. And he tormented us today, didn't he, with the penalty scored from the spot. And of course, you can dispute the penalty all you want, but look, the fact is Watford did not deserve to even have a point from this game. And so even if some people may say that the penalty was a little unjust, a little harsh, a little soft, whatever you want to say, the fact of the matter is that Watford just did not do enough, did not do anything resembling a performance that justified any points. This game was the one they needed to win in order to have a faint hope of staying up. We all knew that the relegation was going to happen. It was just a question of when. And to lose to your rival, Crystal Palace, of course, a team whose fans and Watford's fans do not see eye to eye on anything and have not gotten along ever, really. You don't want to get relegated at Selhurst Park. I mean, it was going to happen anyway at some point, but to lose at Selhurst Park and have the Palace fans all over your back as they were, not a good look. But look, this is not a game that was the one, really. It was the entire season that relegated Watford. It was the preseason that relegated Watford. It was the summer and the lack of investment in defense that relegated Watford even before a ball was kicked this Premier League season. And that really is that. Now, we know that the club has financial problems and has some issues with finance. There's no question. I think that's an open secret. But I think that with that comes even greater responsibility from those in charge to make the kinds of sound investments that you have to make, given the budget that you've got and given the situation at the club financially. But that just didn't happen this season. Didn't happen. We invested in players that didn't care. We invested in no defense at all, really. Where was the defense? And that didn't come until January. And the one person from that SKK group who showed you any heart today was Hassani Kamara, and he got sent off in this one for his endeavors. But look, it was emblematic of a very sloppy season as well. Watford gave the ball away today too many times. They didn't want it. It was a hot potato to them. They did not want to touch it. They did not want to get burned. But in the reality, the end of the day, we all got burned here the whole entire season. This has been a most frustrating season for Watford in so many ways because as a Watford fan, I believe this could have been avoided had the board spent wisely and sensibly and invested wisely and sensibly, not just this season, not just in the previous summer, but throughout the last couple of years, 3 or 4 years, we might not have been in this position today. I firmly believe we could have been still in the Premier League surviving. But when you spend 18.5 million pounds on Andre Gray, which is what, 2007 or 2017 or 18, when you spend money on players who are now off somewhere else and put all this money into them and don't play them, or they never really see a game at all, or they're in another club, it's just a wasted investment. And with the fact that there's financial problems at the club, you should have foreseen these kinds of things and you should spend wisely and strategize more carefully. We all know now that the hire and fire, the sacking model that has come from the Potsos has not worked. It's run its course. The petrol is now run out of its. Listen, the bottom line here is that this team was doomed, weren't they? From quite a long time ago. And although I had been so optimistic about an 11th place finish, can you imagine? Now, I said that in June of 2021 about this team, that I thought that they had the ability to finish mid table. They didn't. Obviously, I turned out to be wrong on that. Many Watford fans had said in January that this lot was going down, and they were all correct in the end, weren't they? They were all correct. But you see, this is the thing. Had this board spent very keenly and sensibly rather than in very haphazard ways and underinvesting in defending and not doing enough to get defenders in here, that's look, if they had done more to defend to bring in defenders, we might have a different situation. I think we probably would have stayed up. We have some good players here, but they're not good enough. They're not good enough for the Premier League. And you saw it today against Palace, not good enough, not inspired enough, not willing to even play for pride. That shows you that we have a bunch of players who aren't bothered, aren't interested, couldn't care less but for the wages. And they're going to be all off in the summer. And really, it won't be a minute too soon for lots of these players. I would love to say that any John Eustace appointment would be very welcome. If he comes in, fine. If it's Diego Martinez, fine. I'll live with either one of those two managers coming in at Watford and shaking things up and starting from the ground up, because that's what we're going to really have to need here before we go any further. Now, of course, I'll reserve judgment on whether or not I think Watford will return immediately. We'll have to wait and see in the summer just how the signings come up and what happens and who's going to be in charge here. But it's quite clear to me now, you have to just strip this thing down to the bare bones and start again. You keep Camera, you keep João Pedro, you keep Cucho Hernandez, you bring back Joseph Hungbo, you bring back Matty Pollock, and maybe Zinkernagel, unless Forrest go up, of course, because he probably will want to play Premier League football. But you bring back those players, and then you build from there. And maybe if you keep Kuchka around as a veteran presence, you keep Cabaselli around as a veteran presence, fine. I'll stay with that. But you've got to then start building and bring in a striker here who can put the ball in the back of the net. Bring in a striker, please. You're going to need a target man who knows what to do. Josh King is going to have to move on, I think. Now, would he score more goals in the championship? He hasn't scored enough for us this season. And look, the reality is that you clear out this club, you clear out this team, and you really start afresh here. But Palace today were every bit deserving of their win. They should have had 3 or 4 if it was not for Ben Foster in goal. And he was very good today, Ben Foster. He showed you fighting spirit, showed you that he cared enough. If it wasn't for Ben Foster, this could have been out of hand. It could have been 4 or 5. But as it stood, it was 1-0, and that was all that was required. Watford had to win this game to sustain any kind of hope of staying in the league. But look, we all knew from quite some time ago, at least I knew from that that loss against Leeds, that it was over for Watford. And many fans, as I said, of this Watford Football Club knew that it was back in January after the home loss to Norwich City that they were going to go down, and they were all correct in hindsight. That really finishes this one up. There's not much more to say about this one, other than the fact that on Wednesday, Watford take on Everton. They will be without Hassan Kamara. But look, at least he had the fighting spirit, and that is what is required at this club and on the field to make things right. Building, rebuilding is going to be the thing for Watford now the next season or two. And it could be at least a 2 or 3 year stay in the championship before these lads come back up with an identity, because that's what Watford need now on the pitch, an identity. They need an identity in the way they handle management, the way they do recruiting. There needs to be an identity and a plan, and something that's articulable for the Watford fan base to see, and for the Watford players to play for, and for everyone at Watford to be proud of. This has been the Orns 10-minute take.